Hey everybody, it's NC Floor Guys here. Today I'm going to go over a house that I performed a miracle on. It started off with a 100-year-old floor and it was a mess. This job was for one of my regular contractors and I knew that it would be a big challenge. One of the things that had going on here was this area where someone had done a previous repair and had just cut it square and just dropped some boards in. So the client wanted to have that removed and had some new oak flooring laced in so that it looked natural. Here's another spot by the hearth where they had some fire damage and all this wood was burned. The client wanted that taken out and blended in seamlessly so that it looked natural. So we had to go ahead and do those two things, plus the entire floor was just extremely rough and there was a large area against the wall that was moving a lot, so I knew I had a lot of work to do. The first thing I did was to remove that old patch, and you can see here where they cut it straight. Next I had to cut back into each side with the skill saw and carefully remove those so that I could finger join the new wood with the old, so that after I sand it and stain it, it blends in seamlessly. I did the same thing with the hearth. I finger joined it and put in a new border piece so that it blended in seamlessly. For the first round, I put in a heavy putty. Now that's a combination of sawdust and wood glue, and it's designed for larger cracks, anything that might be structural, and it will dry in those cracks really hard and last for a lifetime. You can see we did that at several of the end butts and all the way down the walls, and the pieces coming off the wall for about 1.5 feet because all those were a little bit loose. We also put that heavy putty around both of the areas that we had done the repair and the lacing. After that was all finished, I cleaned up and I started doing some drum sanding. This floor was so tough and so rough and such a mess, I started with 24 grit, which are basically just big rocks glued to the bottom of the sandpaper, and that's what was necessary in this case to tear off that old finish. In fact, it was so rough I actually ended up cutting it at an angle, and then I switched back to the other direction on an angle, and then finally I cut it with the grain. So I cut it with 24 grit 3 times. Okay, so where are we right now? We have drum sanded this floor with 24 grit and 36 grit. We did a heavy filler over here on these cracks, which honestly, they're huge. That's 1/4 inch, no problem. But using that heavy filler, that combination of sawdust and wood glue, it really firmed up this whole side of all that loose wood that it's probably kind of thin on the top, maybe had some rotten spots. So that's going good. Our lace ends are blending in pretty well. Colors off a bit, but when we stain that, those are going to blend in. Now there's something else on this old floor that you're going to see when you get up close. You can see it really good in person, but on the camera you got to get kind of close. Look at all the gaps that exist in the flooring. You see them on the end butts. You see them, you know, all the way down the line, and they're everywhere. It's all the way across the floor. So we're going to go ahead and treat those as well, and what we're going to use is the trowelable wood filler. And this time we're just going to cover most of the floor with that. You can cover the entire floor. On this particular project, I think I'm going to cover most of it. So let me show you what that looks like. I had 2 types of wood filler with me. One was made by Bona. It's really thick. It's called Patch. I put that in first. The next one I'm going to use is made by Woodwise. Now for this one I added some extra water. Now that thins it out a little bit and makes it easier and faster to spread. Here I just wanted to show that it's important that when you're spreading this filler, you want to pull across the grain, across those lines, and that'll force that filler deep down into those cracks and you'll get a good seal. So we started with a floor full of cracks, and when we finished laying that filler, you can see I went ahead and covered the entire floor 100%. You let that dry overnight, and then you can start doing your fine sanding, and that filler will stay down in there, and it really takes a stain well. So I made some stain samples for the client to approve. They picked out something that they liked. They went with a mid-tone brown, a nice soft color that should match with everything. And then I did my fine drum sanding. I finished off with a 80 grit and then 100 grit. And I did the same thing with the edges. I wanted to make a note about a couple of these spots that you might see. You see these dark patches here in the middle of the floor? They kind of look like a shadow. That's where the floor had previously gotten wet. When oak gets wet, it turns black. And that dark black discoloration can go very deeply into the wood. So you're going to see some of those that don't come out. Your option at that point really is to cut out every single dark spot and just take forever and cost a fortune and replace half of the floor, or you just kind of live with some of those. Especially if it's an old floor, you know you're going to have some extra character. So I just left in a few of those and stained them to blend in. I applied the stain and then went on top of that with several coats of a satin finish, a waterborne, a low VOC, and the finished product looked amazing. I turned an old busted floor into a new house, and the clients loved it and everyone was happy. Thanks for watching.